And I will officially open the August 18th Southampton Planning Board meeting. This evening, all our members are present. We have Cindy Palmer, that's excused, she's absent tonight. And our first order of business is an A&R for 31 Valley Road, and it's submitted by Lynn Paulson and Richard Paulson. And is it Lynn that's going to present to tell us what you're doing with your A&R?
Don't have a formal presentation, but
No, that's fine, because we have the map in front of us.
Yeah.
We're looking to divide off a piece of the land and sell that. We've been approached by neighbor, and that's basically, we had the surveyor come in and do the analysis as you see there, and he's done the initial work, and it looks like it's a reasonable lot. At the moment, the interest is just to essentially keep it on land. There's a neighbor that's approached us about it, and that's why.
Who is Mr. Labrie purchasing it?
Correct.
Okay. And right now, they're going to keep it open space?
That's the plan.
Yeah. But it is a legal lot in any event.
Correct.
Yes. It's just curious, not that it matters, but it's just curious how it wasn't just incorporated into the rest of his parcel, you know?
This plan was actually prepared before, and we found out sort of after the fact.
Okay.
So I think they had considered that before the sale, before we purchased the house.
Gotcha. We got the frontage and the acreage is correct. Any questions from the board members?
It's pretty straightforward.
None.
All right, that being said, do I have a motion to accept the A&R?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the A&R.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other further questions or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
And just to make an amendment to this, that we're also at the same time going to issue the street address number in the event that this parcel, the Labries sell that for a lot, but I'm going to issue number 29 because the existing owners of Paulson's, you're in number 31, and the opposite neighbor is number 25.
That's Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith, so I'm going to assign number 29 to that lot as well, for the assessor's purpose. Other than that, I'm going to sign this for you. How many copies would you like? Because I need 4. So would you like the rest of them?
Sure.
Good.
Just leave it there, I think. Sharpie.
Yeah, remember, I'm the only one that needs to sign them from now on. Remember, we passed that?
Forgot about that. It's been a while.
This is the first time I've seen you in the flesh since
I know.
this all began.
Oh, no, I town meeting.
Oh, yeah, right, to when we burned up outside, yeah.
I had a nice tan.
And do you keep the original Mylar? or-
No, you have to file that with the Registry of Deeds.
Okay, so
That's-
I take that back.
Yep. Okay, so there's, you've got 3 paper and 1.
But I could try to remember what all my comments were.
I know, I had a
First time I reviewed it.
I had a question mark here earlier, and now I'm looking at it, I'm like, I'm not quite sure what my question was.
I asked about that.
I've got a band here somewhere.
Had more on the parking stuff than the water,
Oh,
than the floodplain stuff,
It's very nice meeting y'all, thank you.
but. You too.
oh yeah, thank you. Have a
Thank
nice
you. Good
evening
luck.
and
Sorry
best of
it took
luck.
so long. You were patient and waiting since we haven't met in a while. All right, thank you.
Thank you, have a good evening.
Good night now. Oh, Lynn, do you want a copy of the application just for your records, or did you keep one? Just mark this for you. Just so you have something.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Smith.
How can you tell?
My glasses are fogging with these masks. Baloney here. How are you, and good to see you?
Thank you. We just, picked up like the K95s.
Oh, well, I'm happy to meet you in person.
Oh, yeah. well,
First
that
time.
food stuff is great.
Dan LaValle and then Sarah Stein.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, yeah, my complaint with the Zoom stuff was, and why I prefer the live meetings, were because you can't read people
Yes.
through the Zoom. You really can't. And that's
Well, you can't read people with this on either.
And then you come in, "Hey, you got this.
We just do charades. You
Who
got
knows
that?
what is going on under those masks?
You don't want to know.
Well, at least you're out and about now, and so
Where would you like to start? How are you feeling? You're feeling somewhat better, huh?
yeah, no.
Oh,
I thought I'd be one of the lucky ones and beat it, and as I wean myself off of the prescription, I was feeling great. I couldn't do anything like this. And then about the beginning of June, my hand started getting stiff in the fingers and very sore. And I attributed it to weeding I had just done. But after a couple of weeks, it was not getting any better. And then I'm remembering, gee whiz, last fall, I attributed the soreness in my hand to playing Legos with my grandson.
mhm.
And it never got better. And it got worse. It turned out it had nothing to do with playing Legos. It was just polymyalgia rheumatica, something I'd never heard of. And so right now, I'm off the scripts, but when I wake up in the morning, I can't do any more than this. And right now, I can do this, but it's not really a tight fist.
Yeah.
And if I want to try to cut my steak, I do it with my left hand now.
So that must have, with your keyboarding, has got to be limited, right?
Yeah, it was just, I can do one hand unpack, but this was just sort of out of commission. So I think I'm gonna have to go back on the prednisone, which I really don't want to do, or find out some other, other thing. But
So is that a nice little segue into something you'd like to tell us?
well, I had a conversation with Paul, and I actually have been thinking about this for over the last year, because I felt that between that and the isolation and the Zoom meetings and stuff, that I really didn't feel like I was contributing as much as I needed to move this along as fast as you wanted it to. And so I had a conversation with Paul today, and today is my last meeting. This is the last thing I'm going to be working on. And I've been going back and forth on this for quite a few months in terms of, do I or don't I? Because I didn't really want to leave you in the lurch. But there is a replacement who is as good as me.
Nice, hey, is he,
Probably better in somebody's.
hey, is he nicer?
He is nicer. He's a nicer guy. But he was a recently retired, a 25-year plus director of planning in another local community in our region. And I happened to have lunch with him, and I didn't ask, but he asked, you know, I told him I was, you know, planning on phasing myself out, and he was interested.
Good.
Who's
So,
this?
I'm gonna have Paul talk to him.
Gotcha.
And probably have him come in and talk to you, and I think, I don't want to throw his name out.
Right.
Or her, his or her name out,
We don't even know.
as the case may be.
But I mean,
I think you will be, he's super experienced. I've worked with him for all the time that he's been up here. He's been a planner for 40 years. He's been in this community for 25 as a director. I worked with him through PVPC on numerous zoning things, so he knows zoning as well as I know. He knows everything as well as I know.
Good.
I mean,
well, that helps, that helps.
You know, if you get into municipal planning, you learn quickly that it's nothing that they taught you in college. It's all on the job.
Especially here in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in Massachusetts.
Seat of the pants.
It's seat of the pants, on the job training, and usually learning not to repeat that mistake again. And I think, I know, you know, if you can work it out with him, you'll be happy.
Well,
He's really
I'm happy for you, and I'm sad for us because you've been a great resource for us, but I do respect, and, you know, with all due respect, your health and your mental issues, and, you know, sometimes we all get that way where you just don't have the zeal or the zest to keep on doing something you once loved to do.
That's the truth. And, you know, I was really good at this. You know, not because I'm terribly smart, but only because I'm so old, and I've been doing it for 40 years. And, you know, and you just really do learn it by, you know, on the job. But I've been working with the Southampton Planning Board for 20 years, going way back to Hank Barton, who first had me come in to help with some subdivisions and the like, you know, as a side thing. And I've sort of been in and out, but continuing with that respect for the last 20 years. And I've been really lucky that you've had some fantastic boards. I mean, you really have had some of the best boards that I've been able to work with, or I've had the pleasure to work with.
Thank you.
Over those years. And there are some towns that I would not, if I didn't have to, I wouldn't work with those boards. And I have not followed much of the board with those boards. But Southampton has been really well served over the years, in my opinion, by the people that they've elected to the boards, and the people who serve on the boards, and they're fortunate.
Well, I think to your credit, you told it like it is. You mentioned in the conversation this afternoon, well, the guy might be nicer than I. And I said, well, maybe a little more eloquent, but, you know, on the same token, I enjoyed that part of you, that you know, you didn't bend and sway. It is what it is. You could tell from your experience how.
Well, it depends whether you call it candor or blunt. And if you happen to like that, it's candor. And if you happen to not like that, it's blunt.
Well said.
Mine has always been, I would rather people were candid with me. So I knew what they were talking about, and I'm not gonna be mad at you, if we disagree, it's just, that's the way it is, and they try to have it out there. So you know that, and you can deal with it, so I've always been sort of that out there, you know, and putting it out there. It's not, sometimes
Well, you've seen a lot come down the pike.
yeah.
So
I've dealt with thousands of special permits and site plans and hundreds of subdivisions in 40 years. And I don't know if it's the luck of the draw, but for some reason, you know, my first job was in Belchertown, which at that point was the fastest growing community in the state. I went over, went to Westfield, or I went to Northampton. That was boomtown back in the 80s, you know, the downtown was all like. When I went to Westfield, they were getting 10,000, it was something like that, new permits a year. I mean, it was, and so, you know, yeah, boy, I learned. Because I had to. But it's a great field. I love it. I love working with towns. I love planning. It really makes you think. And I like to, I use Northampton as my example, in a lot of respects, which is Northampton didn't happen by accident. With the downtown and all of that, especially when during the heyday. That was done by plan. It was not a fluke. It was done by some, real thought and a real exercise of good planning and good bylaws and good regulations. And it turned out like that. It also felt that, Reagan deregulated the banks and they went all crazy, making irresponsible loans, throwing it to all these, building owners and which invested a whole lot of cash into the downtown and fixed it up. And they subsequently went bankrupt and a whole other people came in and took over and kept it going. That helped a lot.
They did.
And Paul knows that.
I worked in the middle of it.
Yeah, you did. That's right. That's where I first met Paul. That was like back in the 80s.
Yep.
So I've known Paul for a long time. My wife has known him even more.
I've known your wife for 50 years
50-year anniversary.
of our
Congratulations.
graduation, yeah.
Oh.
What were we gonna cover tonight there? The off-street parking and loading, or?
Yeah, the off-street parking and loading, we had gone through the last meeting. We actually did that with one of the Zoom meetings. And the version that I sent you was the revised version with all the corrections that were agreed upon through consensus from the board.
Okay.
So I think that's pretty much okay.
I know I wasn't here. I did have a couple questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
On this one. I was curious on the per 1,000 feet, square feet here, if that's applicable throughout, or if it's just not applicable if there's more detail here in the chart. Do you know what I mean by that?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
So 760 down number 2, where there's this chart starts, and it says spaces required per 1,000 square feet.
Yes.
So when it says 2 per dwelling unit, that's 2 per house regardless of the square footage, or 2?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then the 1,000, per 1,000 square feet carries down, say a business, a general office building, it's a minimum of 2 per 1,000 square feet, or minimum of 2 for any general office building?
Let's see. No, that was just 2.
So I wasn't,
If there is a square footage, you would say so in there.
okay, so I don't think this thing up top then is clear.
Yeah.
Spaces.
Oh, I'm sorry. That does apply. I see. I was looking at the column here, not the thing across the top. But yeah, it does apply to those. It applies to everything in those 2 columns.
Okay, but it doesn't apply if it says 2 per dwelling. If it's a 3,000 square foot home, it's
Correct.
2.
That's right. If there's a caveat in there, that would supersede.
Okay, all right, that was my question. And then I just had a couple questions on this, and I haven't been involved, so tell me if this is not the right time to do this. But there's a few things in the master plan, like, talking about a townhouse category, talking about cluster development, talking about trying to make accessory apartments more, I don't know, easier for people to do.
Yeah.
I didn't see that reflected in here.
And the parking?
And I know this is just parking.
Yeah.
I'm-
Probably last time we're reading a separate section that deals with accessory apartments. I think we already did that.
Yeah, we did.
We did that.
Yeah.
And if you are getting into other things, it would be under the table of uses, where they would be identified.
Okay, so if there's gonna be a townhouse category, that shouldn't fall in here instead of multifamily residence?
Well, again, unless the townhouse is considered to be a single unit within that development.
Okay. That's fine, I was
Yeah.
more just curious. And then my only other question is, how would like a new mixed-use district be reflected with parking, potentially
When you
less?
when you adopt a mixed-use district, that's when you would.
That would factor it in then, okay.
Done a lot of those.
So a question on that, is there a way to make the wording clearer, so if we go back and revisit this, that the 1,000 square feet is more obvious?
Well, how?
I haven't really looked at it, but is
I
it?
mean, I guess I would only say that, when it goes to the next page,
Yep.
just paste that up at the top of each one.
Okay.
But that's, I guess, that's how I would do that.
Mhm.
Can I ask what document you're referencing?
It's the updated bylaws Larry had put together.
Are they available to everyone, or were they just sent to you guys?
That's,
And if possible, can I get a copy?
Yes.
yes, you can definitely get a copy.
But that would just be a format.
Yeah, simple thing, but, 10 years from now, whatever.
Yeah.
The,
And then I had one other question on this one, and I don't know if this is the place to do it, but one thing about low-impact development for stormwater, that was another thing in the master plan as a goal. Is this a place that something like that could be inserted in terms of any incentive for gravel parking versus paved parking?
If you wanted to do that, yes. But I think, you have to have a real conversation on lid.
On what?
Low impact.
Okay, on what's
I'll take one.
the best way to handle that? I mean, I know there's obviously
Yeah, I
different,
mean, if you read the thing I sent you today,
I didn't check my email today. I guess I was working.
check your email. Because what I sent you today is Paul sent me something that Ivan Bond has done.
Okay.
And this is kind of a discussion that I didn't want to get into in detail when we were doing the stormwater management bylaw. So I'll let the blog back.
Yeah. Gives us a chance to find the email.
Exactly.
There it is.
I didn't get that. I don't know if I'm not getting the forwarding.
It's this, I don't know, I can forward it, I can send it to you.
It's under the standard Southampton.
Yeah, no, that's not your fault. I've been having issues getting them forwarded for some
So I
reason.
can do
Do you mind forwarding
forward.
it to me right now, and then we'll have to take a look at that.
Sarah G. Stein, yeah. Okay, if the internet cooperates, you should get it in a minute.
Yep, perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
There's a section,
Yeah.
there's actually two sections there. I'd like to talk to you about tonight that I think are relevant. One is the lid and one is the peer review.
Yes? Oh, of course. Yeah. Let's see here. Forward. Do you want me to fax it to you? Just kidding. It was a joke.
I do have an e-fax number if you need it.
Is that a thing?
It is a thing.
Oh.
There are some attorneys that are still listening.
All right. It said sent.
Thank you.
Yep.
Huh, I'm not able to open it from Google for some reason.
So overall, this is kind of like your general advice to us, kind of closing thoughts and.
It's that, again, I'll leave it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But it was very, through that process of developing the subdivision regulations, it was really interesting about the near unanimous feelings about lid from the municipalities
Okay.
that we were working with.
Thanks, sir.
I have this, yeah.
I have a question on the business ones, Larry. The only reason I
Oh yeah, just copy,
Reminds
just
me of
copy
a
the title across each
conversation.
page. I would get it.
Yeah.
was at O'Reilly Auto Parts on College Highway. The guy called and he was, by the old standards, he was confused, or maybe it was an inquiry for somebody else about the total square footage of the store and why so many parking places were required.
Yeah, that's sort of why
Is there waivers involved in the?
there's a section in it that just allows, it comes from the point of view that you can't have too few You can have some, you can have too few, and you can't have too many. Because typically with most communities, they will give you the minimum, you have to have at least X number of parking spaces. And that can go up to 1 million, because they'll have a cap on it. And so, you can end up with, over-design
Yeah.
and too much blacktop, and parking lots that aren't going to be used. You also have the issue of, parking demand based upon 1 month of the year.
Uh-huh.
That month being from Thanksgiving to Christmas.
Mhm.
That's the one time that parking lot is filled. The rest of the other 11 months, if that's 25% filled,
For sure.
you're doing well. And so there are ways involved with that. But to go to the lit, and Paul, did you get the email I sent out today?
Yes.
Okay. So they're all looking at that now. And
The tips, advice, further explanations?
yes, and it's a section on lid in particular, and then peer review. And this was related to Paul sending me, and I'm not sure where that came from, Paul, but the review that kind of bond did.
All right, I can,
And I
Just
started to
forward
read
it from
through
what you're
that.
doing there. I didn't get the
Let me-
attachment for some reason.
let me-
Oh, yeah,
let
maybe
me-
I could, do you have an iPhone?
Yeah,
Can I
Let
just
me,
do
uh,
AirDrop?
yeah.
I can make copies of this too, because I brought a copy along of that.
I have the original, That's all I need, right?
I don't know.
This is
How
a-
else can I send it to you?
This is a letter, Sarah and Dan, that I got from Randall Kemp regarding Larry's bylaw. So I sent it off to him for his suggestion on what might happen. But Randall's letter, and I believe it was copied to the planning board, if you remember it, but it said, "Thank you for contacting me for input. I think that we need to get together as to what does and what does not constitute a, in quotes, slight increase in runoff.
Right.
Yeah.
The spirit of the current regulations doesn't appear to be much different from stormwater bylaw and regulations that just passed the town meeting earlier this month. Runoff overland flow accumulates contaminants and suspended solids. The goal of the regulations and bylaw is to treat or infiltrate stormwater into the ground instead of running off into water bodies. I jotted down some quick math on the impervious surfaces, driveway and roof surfaces depicted on the site plan and came up with roughly 7,700 square feet. A 1-inch storm generates approximately 62 gallons of runoff per 100 square feet, so development of this lot would generate 4,800 gallons of runoff per 1-inch rain event, 9,600 gallons of runoff per 2-inch rain event, and so on. Is this a slight increase?
Yeah. And dealing with runoff and addressing runoff is not a new thing. That's been, the 40 years I've been doing it, that's been a huge issue. And one that has been, in terms of how you deal with that, has gone through various incarnations of how you deal with that. The most recent being lid. And
Want a copy of that?
when we were,
Excuse me, does anybody else want a copy of that, or do you have it on your?
Yeah, that would be great.
Dan, you want one?
That was the Randall Kemp
I've got to go run them off, sir.
email?
No, the ones that Larry emailed.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. It's much easier than the phone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, I did get it.
What's that?
I don't know why I didn't do it the first time, but thank you.
So have you guys reviewed 1 through 6 for the bylaws? The zoning bylaws? Yeah.
I would refer to Paul Fergal for how far you guys have made it previously.
I don't have, we checked off previous, we looked at previous sections to date, but I don't know if the order is in the proper sequence.
pretty much is.
I know this is something that the board has been working on for many years, right?
Yes, yes,
So-
yes. Yeah, the lockdown was really untimely.
Yeah,
It was for everything, so.
mm-hmm, it's true. So just as a question that may help Joy, all the reviews that we've done, is the plan that, say we get to the end, when we get to the end, we would then, we'd bring the whole thing to town meeting? Or have we been bringing them as sections to town meeting over the years?
You have to do this as an all or nothing,
I see.
because your current bylaw.
There's could be conflicts.
Well, it's a couple of
Okay.
things. First of all, your current bylaw is
It'd be-
really poorly formatted.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Because what happened was every time the town adopted something,
I asked the
they
question.
just added it to the bottom of the bylaw.
I gotcha, yeah.
And it didn't really necessarily relate to the other sections. Plus, the formatting of it changed from section to section depending on who wrote it up.
Yeah,
So that's in bad shape. So as we started going through the process about reformatting it, we realized that, there's just some really old stuff in here that isn't any good anymore. And so we got into the total new one. So you really have to adopt all the sections.
gotcha.
Because you really can't pick out this section and stick it into the current bylaw because it's such a mess.
That totally makes sense. I just
Yeah.
I didn't know the history of it,
Yeah.
because obviously,
So,
It's still new.
my recommendation has always been, when you're doing a zoning bylaw change, do it as its own special town meeting. Hold 3 or 4 public hearings on it, public informational meetings on it, and take it right all the way through. In terms of how you develop it, I mean, the way it's been working is, you get a draft of the section, you go through it, review it, you come to a consensus on this is what it is, what you want to go with. My guess is that at the end of it, when you think you're ready to go for it, you'll probably take another look at that, because I know you guys were around for some of those earlier sections, so you may want to have some issues addressed or questions relative to that. And then once you're pretty much satisfied that that's how you guys want to go, you then go to the public hearing route and I'll start off with that.
All right, so I was getting copies, so what you're suggesting is that this work that Ty and Bond is doing with the town departments regarding that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're doing. What you sent me, I'm not quite sure I thought it came from you guys.
Okay, here's his original email to me on that one. He says, as you know, Ty and Bond is helping Southampton with regulatory compliance with our stormwater permit. They provided the attached technical memoranda, which include recommendations for modifications to be incorporated into our regulations and / bylaws. The recommendations mainly concern planning board, subdivision, stormwater permit, and zoning regs, but also pertain to our general bylaws and should be reviewed by the bylaw committee, fire chief, and board of health. I believe that the planning board is currently reviewing their regulations, so this is an opportune time for this to happen.
Yeah, that's
So,
very true.
so on top of the MS4, now we've got to incorporate more stormwater lingo?
Well, you just adopted a stormwater management bylaw, because the state and the feds have adopted new stormwater management regulations, and so you're adopting bylaws to comply with that. And that's what you did, not too long, a couple of months ago, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And through that, as you may recall, I tried to tactfully point out I thought there were some issues with it. Number one, it also had to do with the biggest issue being, well, I'll go back to the beginning.
It's convoluted.
Well, it also takes you through extra steps you don't have to do, because it's taking out of your subdivision approval, for some reason, stormwater management, and treating that as a separate permit under your stormwater bylaw. And so now you're supposed to, under your subdivision regulations, review your subdivision regulations, except for the stormwater management, because that's now a separate permit, even though you're probably going to be issuing that permit. And you could always do that permit in conjunction with the subdivision approval. But it's never made sense to me why you treat that as a separate permit.
Because my opinion is, I could see where those two don't line up.
For subdivisions?
For subdivision.
They better line up.
Well, no. Isn't there a mechanism where it's out of the planning board's purview? There's a project that needs to be done in town, right? Let's say the state's coming through with
It's a subdivision.
No.
Okay, and that's different.
That's what
Different.
right, so that's what it's,
different. There are certain projects that, yeah, you want a stormwater management permit for because nobody else is looking at the stormwater management. There are other projects, like an apartment complex is coming in for a special permit, where the stormwater management is a critical part of that. How the parking lot's laid out, how the drainage is laid out. I mean, that's a different, and so you're looking at the stormwater management when you're evaluating that project. Same with a subdivision. When a subdivision comes in, stormwater management is a huge part of a subdivision plan.
Well, we're looking at anything that's over 40,000 square feet, period.
Right, but that's different. But there's
So
certain things.
what's the difference?
My point is this: if they're coming into you to get a permit for something anyway, like a subdivision approval or a special permit, the stormwater management should be included and addressed as part of that permit. And you can do that. Many towns do that.
Right.
Okay? There are other types of projects that never come in for another kind of permit, but you still want them to get a stormwater management permit. Those need a separate and distinct stormwater management permit.
Give me an example of that.
so I'll give you an example that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And across the state, where technically we're not creating a new subdivision, but we're creating a new road
Highway project.
highway project, that is not
Yeah.
currently, it doesn't meet under the purview of the town planning board. So
State highway, right.
it doesn't have to be a state highway, it could be a local highway. Because state highway technically doesn't have to, if it's a Mass DOT project, it technically does not have to meet local bylaws per se to stormwater or Concom or things of that nature. They have to meet the state standard, not the local standard.
Or it could be a by right use.
That's what we ran into over in Glendale Road.
I think, I'm not sure, but usually you have a threshold that's over, you say 40,000 square feet. Anything over that, it triggers it. Well, that 40,000 square foot project might not be, it might be a by right use. So it doesn't require a special permit, it doesn't have to come to the planning board. But you still want to address, because it's exceeded that threshold,
Right.
so you want that to go through a review process.
Yes.
And so that requires the stormwater management permit.
All right, so,
Why? Because nobody, otherwise it wouldn't be addressed.
So
But if
explain-
there's another project, and it's already being addressed as part of that project, it makes no sense to have them required to get a separate permit for the same thing.
so explain to me what tie and bond, how is this differentiate from this MS4 in our current bylaw? What's now new about all this jazz?
Well, I had a hard time reading what they sent you. I had a hard time trying to figure, it would have been helpful if they showed you exactly what the changes were, what it said before, and what we're recommending. Instead of just saying, here, adopt this instead. Because I don't have time to go through at that point and do all that.
It came from Randall.
Yeah, I see.
But in large part, from as I was reading through that, is to incorporate more lid mandated measures in the stormwater design of the project. And
I wasn't able to print that out because of the windmill.
so, and I don't think you need to talk to Randall, at least not now. At some point, you have to have Randall come in and explain all this. But this is why I sent you what I sent you with the workshop. And that was a project, it was my last project
Let's see,
at the
yeah,
EDC.
Oh, it is, yeah, okay, nice.
yeah, you're just not formatted, yeah, that's it, that's exactly right, that's it.
And so the proposal was to develop some model subdivision regulations and including into it lid, complete streets, healthy communities, because there's a whole bunch of different things out there that have really good
Goals.
Good things, good goals, exactly, good goals, that's the perfect word for it. That you want to try to, where you can, integrate it into the design of the project, in this particular case, of the subdivisions. And so that was a big part of what this was. It was not only to come up with standard, design requirements, but to try to integrate these new things that have to do with stormwater management. And as we were discussing this, and there were 6 towns involved, 6 town cities, and it involved their planners and their engineers, and we met for, God, it must have been a year and a half, on a monthly basis, and went over this line by line. And what we learned was that a lot of times if you're pushing a lid thing, you're undercutting complete streets. Or you're undercutting, you're undercutting healthy communities or vice versa. And the way we wanted to have the bylaw structured was, there would be an appendix, and under the stormwater management, it would have all the details that we want you to do, and we would say, where you can, incorporate or try to address these three things. And there'd be an appendix that had lid, and it would explain what lid was and what the objectives of it were, and then it would give examples of lid type drainage. You have the same thing for healthy communities, have the same thing for complete streets. And one of the problems, the conflicts that we all came up with are a couple of them. But one of them were, of course, with complete streets and healthy communities, you're trying to address with complete streets, everybody, all users of the street, not just the cars. It's for the bicycles, it's the people with the baby carriages, it's for the bicyclists, etc. And with healthy communities, it was get people out of their houses and get them into the communities and get them out walking and blah, 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 and put in sidewalks so they're not competing with cars, and put street trees up so they're shaded so they can go out when it's really hot, et cetera, et cetera. And what we found was a lot of these things were in conflict, and in conflict with LID, because LID's whole thing is, well, no, let's reduce the amount of runoff, let's get rid of the sidewalks, let's reduce the size of the street, let's have rain gardens instead of detention ponds, and all of which are admirable, are good and worthwhile. But as you know, as a municipal planning board, you're constantly weighing things against each other, constantly. And so it's difficult to go all with one because, well, you want to allow this too, so you got to kind of do a balancing act. And so that's why we wanted to take that approach, so that as every subdivision came in, they could try to integrate these things and balance them as best they could, and you could judge it against that. Mm-hmm. And you would probably judge, well, maybe we want to go heavier on this and lighter on this, or heavier on this and lighter on this. But that's so case by case, parcel by parcel, depending on the land, the topography of the land, and the hydrology of the land, and all of that. And the people who were dealing with the lid aspect of it, and these were not on the committee, these were staff people, believed that lid was the preeminent, and it should supersede all of the other things. And that while they were okay with the complete streets and other communities being treated as an appendage you go to, they wanted the lid to be the preeminent thing, that you had to do this. And that got a lot of really just practical resistance from everyone on the committee. And again, these are all municipal planners, all municipal engineers who have collectively hundreds of subdivisions under their belts, have hundreds of years practicing. And they didn't want to do it like that. They wanted to do it with, well, let's take it on a case-by-case basis and see what of the best of all of them can you integrate into every particular development. And then there were some specific things about the lid, because you got to be very careful with that. And this is what I didn't see with the tide and bond thing, is you need to sit down with them and say exactly what are you talking about in terms of lid. Because we did that with this development of the subdivision regulations, and some of the lid ideas they came up with were turn the cul-de-sac, the center of the cul-de-sac, into a retain. It would be retain.
Detention pond.
A retention pond. Because, okay, and so you have, which makes sense, and quite frankly, I did do once with one community, and the Agawam engineer actually had experience with the other one, both of which turned out to be disasters. Because anytime you have a retention or a detention area, you need to have a fail-safe. You need to have an overflow. You just have to. Because, especially the way storms are coming now, there's just more water than there was before. In my particular circumstance, and it was a big cul-de-sac, and it was a big, deep detention pond, and that thing filled up, and it topped the road, and it went down the driveways, and filled people's basements, and it was a disaster. And this was some of the circumstances the engineer and Agalon had. In order to remedy that, in my particular case, the community I was in, the developer had to pipe a line from the bottom, or from the detention line. It was elevated, so it would go up and then go in. He had to pipe it back under the road, like, it had to have been at least a half mile, I think it was much closer to a mile, all the way back to where he could come up and outlet it. And as the overflow, discharge it. And the reason he had to pipe it was because if he was gonna cut the road and trench it, the new subdivision road he just built, he was gonna have to rebuild that whole frickin' road. Because you as a town are not gonna accept a new road with a brand new trench cut down the middle of it. And so that was an extreme example, extreme solution to it. But after looking at everything, that was really the only thing that they could come up with. So from experience, the recommendation of turning your, just didn't make sense.
And you were saying that in that situation, it was kind of forced into it by some of the lid criteria. Is that what you're stating?
Well, at the time, we thought, what a great idea.
Oh, okay.
Turning your detention, because everybody hates detention ponds.
Yeah.
They're basically a hole in the ground big enough to hold a school bus. And you know it's there because there are arborvitae planted around it.
Yeah.
Is an attempt to screen it. Whenever I go into a subdivision and I see a row of arborvitae, I know it's either screening a tennis court or a detention pond. Just because that's what you have. And nobody really likes big holes in the ground that just are dry for most of the time but fill up when you have water. And if you can find alternatives to that, that's terrific. But, turning your island into one just didn't make a lot of sense. Another lid proposal was to get rid of the catch basins in the stormwater system under the street and go with swales along the edge of both sides of the road. Theory being, water runs off, water discharges, water percolates, and that's great. And I can tell you, when I first started planning back in the late 70s, that's how they did it. In many places, in the community I was working with, and many, many other places. And because it was cheap, the developer liked that better because I didn't have to pay for all the money to put in catch basins and curbing, because we want the water to sheet off. It was a cheap way to do it, and it sort of made some sense to recharge the water to the groundwater. But what that also ended up with is now that road with those two swales becomes a town road. And so who has to go in there and maintain those swales? Well, the Department of Public Works has to go in there and maintain those swales. And they've got to go in there a few times a year and go in there and maintain those swales. That also requires that every driveway that's going to access a lot has to have a culvert under it. Somebody has to maintain that culvert. Okay, that's within the right of way. Typically ends up to, you would like to say the homeowner would maintain it, but homeowners tend not to understand, or some are just lazy, and they'll fill up with leaves, and before you know it, the water's not passing through the culvert, it's now backing all the way up. And so none of the town engineers liked that idea, and so they kept, almost every lid design they came up with, it just didn't make sense on the scale of a municipal subdivision project, just in terms of the volume of the water and all the rest of that. And it was just, they saw that as being really, just a long-term, ongoing maintenance expense to the town. However, interestingly enough, they had no problem doing it with a private development, like a private commercial development. And in fact, in many commercial developments that I did for, that's exactly what they did. They did the lid, they did the parking lot, and they did the little swale, for the recharge and the like. And they did the underground leaching systems, etc. And the reason the municipalities had no, and in many respects it also worked out better for private, especially private commercial developments, was because you didn't need all the acreage to put in a huge detention pond to handle all the water that these parking lots were going to be doing. So it made a lot of sense. It also made a lot of sense because the town didn't have to take care of that. Okay? The town didn't have to take care of that. One of the ideas was using permeable pavement, or porous pavement. And that's pavement that will actually, you can take a bucket of water, pour it on it, and the water goes through it. Sounds like it makes a whole lot of sense. One of the engineers said, well, they had a project, it was a senior housing project in their town, and it was gonna be a model lid project with handle all the drainage. And with porous pavement and all the rest of that. And so they asked the engineer, or the applicant's engineer, so what is the, because they said, we'll kind of come in, we're gonna come in 3 or 4 times a year, we're gonna maintain it, et cetera. And so they said, well, can you tell us exactly what that's going to entail, what the cost is going to be? And so when they came back, they had the cost for it, but suddenly from going to being cleaned every 2 to 3 times, it was going to be cleaned only 1 or 2 times. And then when the developer learned what the cost of cleaning all of that and maintaining it, especially in this climate when you have porous pavement, you know, and you have sand, and you have dust, and you have winter, and you have salt, and all the rest of that. Sometimes it just doesn't hold up, so it becomes a maintenance problem. So the developer ended up shucking the whole idea and saying, put in a conventional system. I don't want to have to be all, you know, have to pay for all that. Now, that's not to say that all lid is bad. There's a lot of lid that's really good. But again, you need to take it on a case-by-case basis, see how it integrates with everything else. One of the big things on lid was they wanted to reduce the width of the roadway to 18 feet. Okay? That's a really, really narrow road. 18 feet, talk to your fire chief about how he feels having an 18-foot wide road, especially if somebody's going to be parking on it. You know, are you going to require no parking on those streets, those subdivision roads? Probably not. Are you going to require that they all have to park up on the grass? Probably not. The other thing we also ran into with the swales on the edge of the road, and I experienced this, it's what you call snowbirds. When you come up and you plow that road, you're pushing all that snow off to this side of the road, and then you're coming this way and you're pushing all the snow on that side of the road. Eventually, all that snow packs down and creates icebergs. So even though you didn't put berms in, you, for at least a few months of the year, effectively have berms. So when you get a spring thaw or a winter thaw or a rainstorm in the winter, there's no way for that water to sheet off into the swales because it's now being retained by the ice berm, which is now directing it down to the lowest part of the road, which is where it probably is going to collect and freeze. So out of the 12 people representing the 6 towns, the vote was 11-1 not to promote lid as the end-all to be-all. The one person who didn't was a planner for a community. He was new to the job, had never dealt with subdivision regulation before, never dealt with subdivision before. But 10 out of 11, I'm sorry, 11 out of 12, that didn't help me, I couldn't vote, said, you know, let's leave it with a more, let's work it in where and when we can and where it best suits everything. And so that's why I think you have to kind of take that approach. In my experience, it's what I call the flavor of the month. About every 3 or 4 years, there's some revolutionary thing that comes up and is going to solve all the problems, going to sweep the country and change everything. I've had it with zoning, I've had it with performance zoning, all kinds of zoning. The most recent being form-based code. It's going to sweep the country and change everything. And all of these things, there are parts of it that are really, really a good idea. And you can take those and integrate it into it, and it works out fine. But I've yet to find something that is just going to throw everything out and replace it with something all new. And that's how I, and it's not just me, feel about the lid. I think the lid is good. I think it really is good in particular types of projects. I think you can integrate portions of it into a lot of it. If you're talking from your public works department, in terms of the subdivision road they want to take over, do they want to maintain a lot of little rain gardens along the road, or do they really rather get in and deal with the one detention area, as unpleasant and as bad as it was?
You know, it almost seems between the MS4
Yeah.
this in the bylaw that we've currently got, that the highway, it's gonna be putting more stress on the highway department, not only, maybe with services, but staffing. It's almost like you gotta have a separate person that's gonna have to manage and,
Yeah, it is.
and address the issues. And my main contention when it came to MS4, the biggest thing that got at my goat was the planning board is a stormwater authority. I said, we'll issue the permit, but don't expect me to, on my volunteer pay, to go out here inspecting properties and writing up this and writing up that.
Wherever I go, I try to have the stormwater permitting authority. I mean, if it's done as part of a subdivision plan, it's you guys, because you're in charge of the subdivision. If it's a wetlands permit, it's the conservation commission. If it's not, it should be the highway department, or the highway superintendent. Because I think that's the person who probably is most learned, or if they have a town engineer or a city engineer, you go with somebody like that.
And I agree with you, but they're so understaffed in this town to begin with, as I imagine they are in other towns, when it comes to this topic.
That's true.
It's true.
But dealing with stormwater management is a very important issue. Especially when you're dealing with, and I never really appreciated this way back when, climate change is huge. And it's gonna impact everything. I mean, for many years, probably 30 out of my 40 years, the big thing was economic development. That's.
You say that again? What?
Economic development.
Economic, okay, thanks.
All the towns are broke after 2.5, all the towns are broke, they need a tax base. They can't afford to survive on just single-family home developments. And so you need a commercial and industrial tax base to underwrite all of that. And so economic development is huge. But now,
You'd find that hard pressed in this town.
yeah, well,
That's not a philosophy over here.
if you're in Long Meadow, or Newton, or a few other communities that can afford.
Economic development is down the bottom of the list in this town.
Well, when communities find that their kids have to move out of town because they can't find a job in their town, I think you start to realize, it is a problem.
But I guess I would say it's not part of our responsibility as the planning board to encourage economic development, right, through our zoning and
Yeah,
through
it
laws.
is.
So,
Economic development is a huge part of planning.
right, so,
And then it's a part of planning, but then we get thrown in our face the master plan and then the
I see.
census that was taken out, the survey, and they don't line up.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that they're both moving targets.
Right.
They're, as if they're set in stone for the next 25 years. They're not set in stone for the next 5 years, in my book.
Well, you have to understand that a master plan it's a goal, an objective. And it's as of that day, that snapshot of what you have.
Exactly.
I mean, who knew the internet? And the impact that was gonna have, everybody that did your master plans before the internet, boom, it blew up, it changed everything. And so your master plan gives you, well, first of all, your master plan doesn't give you much in the way of specifics. It won't give you specific bylaws. It won't give you specific regulations to achieve what the goal was that you're talking about. Typically with a master plan, they're also rather idealistic as well. Master plans are not bad. Master plans are really, really good. They're really, really good in terms of organizing community and consolidating the thought process and the discussion and really trying to get everybody on the same page. I find the master plan to be most effective in terms of coordinating the ZBA, the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, and whoever is issuing permits are all issuing them in consort with the same objectives and the same goals, so that they're not undercutting each other. So that's where the master plan comes in it's very, very important. But, most master plans are not going to be implemented like that. They've got a list of, 4 or 5 pages of recommendations to go through. If you're a a small town with volunteer boards, and small departments, you oftentimes can't do everything that is included in that. And so you do the best you can. And then as you alluded to, Paul, in 5 years, circumstances may have changed, like a pandemic or something, that totally skew everything. So you're constantly in flux. I mean, I've always said, like zoning bylaws and master plans, they're not etched in granite. I mean, they've got to be flexible because you've got to be able to change and to adjust.
You take the demographics and the age of your community, which there's a turnover every 5, even 10, more so probably 10 years, and all those ideals that were set in stone by that group of people have now been shifted to another age group that might not have those same ideals.
So that's very true.
I would say that the goal, or the goal that this planning board had set out many years ago to try to put better structure behind the bylaws was a noble goal, because it will allow for, once it's established, future generations to make those changes more easily. So I think that it's the right path, and although it has taken a long time, it's the path we should continue on.
Yeah, we've made a lot of progress. I'm trying to think how many more sections we've got to go. Is there maybe
This, you're probably, I
Six.
think you're probably 60% of the way through.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. But to be honest, and I think master plans are good, your zoning is what makes your town what it is. Because your zoning tells you what you can do and where you can do it. And in many respects, how you can do it.
And you would say that for any town.
Yeah, I would say that for every town, because that's what governs it. I mean, that's, it's written down, it's applied uniformly to everybody, supposedly, in a best world. But literally, it's, it tells you what can go and where it can go. And that's really what shapes your path.
and that was shaped by public input and the public hearings. It
Yeah.
wasn't just the board guided it along and drew up the recommendations, but it was the public hearings and the town itself
Sure.
that accepted that path to
I mean,
take.
as a planner in a community, I would constantly have people coming in there and saying, what do you mean I can't do that? What do you mean the bylaw says I can't do that? And typically it's, what do you mean, you saying I can't do that? And my response is exactly that, which is, you know something? I didn't adopt any of this. If it's a town, you adopted this. You adopted this at town meeting. Or if you're in a city, the city council adopted this. I didn't adopt this. Well,
Yeah.
you did. And if you don't like it, go change it. And that's where, the kind of community you have is really, your fault. Or your pride, as the case may be. Because, you're the ones that have put all that together. You're the ones that have developed the zoning that does that. You're the ones that have the boards, that approve the projects and approve the permits. And when I get back to, Northampton, downtown Northampton didn't happen by chance. It was thought out and it was planned out.
And it's undergoing another change.
Yeah, exactly. And what we did back in the 80s, that's a long time ago. That was a real long time ago. But getting back to the lid thing, I would invite Tigenbond to come in and be specific, identify exactly what were the changes, and exactly when they talk about lid, what specifically are they talking about? What type of design thing?
So I take it, this is gonna have to be incorporated in the subdivision regs or the stormwater regs, or both?
That's what she's got it, zoning, subdivision regs, stormwater management, and these are the changes you have to make. And I guess I would just, be clear on what those changes are and what they do. And I think you want to leave yourself flexibility. Because as important as stormwater is, This was sort of the issue that we had with the person that was pushing, with the subdivision regs, the staff person that was pushing the lid stuff, which was just not accepting that it's a balancing act. I mean, it really is. You've got a lot of balls going in the air, and you're just trying to, get the best out of each one that you can. And you can't necessarily just take one and have it just squash and cancel out everything else.
Yeah, no, I think this is worthwhile to discuss the intent of this. Obviously, we know what the intent is, but some of these regulations, I'm going through this tech memo, they seem piecemeal with respect to, each prescribed specification when it comes to, lane widths, when it comes to shoulders, comes to bike lanes, et cetera. Some of it lines up with the conflicts you made, but some of these conflicts violate some of Massachusetts general laws, particularly, talks about sidewalk widths that could be a 4-foot width. Well, actually, that's not true, because Mass AAB, Access and our Architectural Board says you need, 5 feet as a minimum, or you can do 4, but you gotta do like 200-foot turnaround areas.
Right.
So what's the purpose of devoting a 200-foot turnaround area where you gotta devote that space? I mean,
Yeah, well, and here's the argument that we were getting from the lid proponent was, get rid of the sidewalk, you don't need the sidewalks. Well, then that means I'm teaching my kid how to ride their bike in the street. That means I'm taking my, newborn in the stroller along the edge of the breakdown lane, to go for a walk. And the alternative to the sidewalks that they had was, well, we're gonna put in hiking trails, in amongst, the neighborhoods. Which I thought, that's terrific, but if you're in a wheelchair, that's not so great. And it doesn't really address what the function, I used to be anti-sidewalk. I was huge. I mean, there was a time when sidewalks were not good, and you were getting rid of sidewalks, because they just, whatever. And then I learned that, boy, that was a really bad thing. Sidewalks are a huge part of the social fabric of the neighborhood.
Right.
I mean, this is where, if you're in a walker or a wheelchair, this is how you get to visit your neighbor. It's by the sidewalk. It's not going down into the road, trying to negotiate around vehicles, moving vehicles, and then going into your neighbor's driveway. I mean, it's part of the social fabric of the development, the social activity within the neighborhood. And I did a total about face on sidewalks. And I'm huge now on sidewalks on both sides of the street. I used to be just one side.
Yeah.
But I think sidewalks are a very important thing. I learned that by going to a number of workshops and lectures people gave. It was like, that's true. There is a big picture
Yeah.
that you need to be dealing with.
Just for the 2 new members while we're on sidewalks, that in subdivisions, they're required, but they can get a waiver for only doing them on one side, but they have to pay the difference in a payment in lieu of fund
That's right.
for not putting it on the other side.
has there been any access to that funding, or has there been anything done with that funding? I feel like,
No, there's money there, just nothing done with it yet.
how much do you know? Isn't it?
I'm just gonna guess there's over 20,000.
So, a lesson I'm learning on these projects, working with various communities, is time value of money. Okay, where you get a developer 5 years ago that puts $20,000 in or whatever, and let's say you come back 10 years later,
It's not gonna buy you the $20,000.
it's not going to buy you anything. So every year with inflation, you're losing 4% of its value.
Yeah.
So with construction, escalation with if you do it as a municipality with the escalated prevailing wage rates, you got to throw into that.
Yeah.
You're getting a fraction back
Yeah.
of that sidewalk value.
Sure.
So to me, I feel like that is an absolute waste of time for a municipality to be.
If you, in the lieu payment, had the developer give you the value of prevailing wages and the community having to actually build somewhere the same length of sidewalk,
Yes.
that developer is going to say, screw that. It's cheaper for me to build sidewalk on the other side.
Right.
I'm going to put them in on both sides.
Yeah, and I have a.
And if you have a sidewalk fund, you should have a sidewalk plan. So that as the funds become available, you know where you can invest that and where you have a need for the sidewalks.
Right, and I'm seeing other communities across the state getting rid of that idea.
Yeah.
I asked a question yesterday for another community across the state. I'm working on a project. My client wanted to basically provide a sidewalk or payment in lieu of the actual construction.
Yeah.
The town's like, no way, absolutely not. Because they've been through it before. They've,
Sure.
allowed the subdivisions to go in with the waivers. And now they have
And now they
a
have-
fraction of the money. That's not
And
really,
now the subdivision neighbors are petitioning the town to put a sidewalk. And so now the town's got to pay to go do it. Belchertown Planning Board, no discussion, sidewalk both sides of the street. Don't even waste our time asking for a waiver.
Well, that sounds like
Just-
a good outcome of our conversations tonight. Is there a way that we can make a motion to change our bylaws?
That would
such
have to go through public hearing, though.
Well, as we're changing our bylaws.
well, it's a current bylaw that it's required.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in our updating of the
And in
bylaws.
some cases, the little payment may make sense. It's just don't make it an automatic yes.
Don't handcuff yourself.
Yeah. I mean,
Or
I
we
love Citizen Board, you have a horrible job. Okay, you mostly are all unpaid volunteers, totally unappreciated. And it's really hard to say no to people, to applicants, like whatever stuff. It's really hard to say no.
It's not that hard.
Well,
You haven't sat in front of,
it isn't hard for me.
in front of
but it's
this
hard
board
for
too
a lot of
often.
people.
Huh.
And
Maybe it's us, we're okay with saying no.
especially when they say, well, you've let these other three people do it like that.
Right.
And it's like, well, at some point, it's like, yeah, but you know what, hey, we're sorry you're the first one, but that's it.
I'm thinking of two that we collected on, perhaps a third, but we also had one that I recall that was, given that, they knew the waiver was there, but they opted to put it in.
Install it, yeah.
Install it, probably for the same reasons you stated a minute ago, so.
I mean, I'm a proponent for it. I mean, the amount of people I see walking on my street, in the middle of the street or side of the road, or jogging on a daily basis is really indicative of how much it's needed.
Sure.
And-
You ask most police chiefs,
Yeah.
they'll want the sidewalk.
Right,
Complete streets
How much-
want sidewalks.
How much sidewalk can you get, say for instance, there's 20 grand in that account or 25, how much do you get for that? You can't get a hell of a lot, I wouldn't
you
imagine.
can maybe get 1,000 feet if that, depending if it's asphalt.
Yeah.
There's also like a mobilization, I don't know, just, it's a factor, you can only
Yeah.
get somebody out for a certain.
Right, but here's the deal, like, what I'm seeing communities doing too is that they're leveraging the private developers as much as they can because they know that they're gonna hold the contractor's feet to the fire with lump sum bids and with cost overruns not being usually
Right,
even entertained
correct.
by big money developers because they take a very hard stance of, this is private money, we're not paying for ridiculous
Right, and that's never.
claims. And communities want that, believe it or not, communities use that to their, advantage to squeeze out as much as they can versus them trying to do it themselves.
Yep.
Because then you gotta, hire somebody, to do the work, mobilization, additional effort when you thought that the cost was gonna cost, $40 a square yard to put in a sidewalk.
Yeah.
It's actually gonna be a lot more, when you start factoring all the other things, so. And frankly, once, the tsunami of the infrastructure bill gets to the street, there's gonna be a huge escalation, because contractors are gonna be busy. They're not gonna be, like right now, let's talk about the current situation we're in with the economy, where
Yep.
everything's gonna be escalated. People are gonna be so busy, contractors are gonna be not as hungry for the work, because there's not enough contractors. There's not enough engineers. We gotta, that's not gonna be a good place to be if we're trying to squeeze something out of 20 grand
No, that's true.
in the near future.
What,
That's true.
who would I run that by, what department, to see where maybe a preference is for some sidewalk?
Well, I think we gotta talk, we should probably get Randall and Ed Gibson in this
Yeah.
discussion, because,
I mean, you're probably talking highway, and probably a lot of it is also school. You know, safe routes to school.
well, that's a total different bucket of funds, but you
It
could.
is, but I mean, when you're looking at priority,
That woman is, I'm sorry, Safe Routes from School woman emailed us about
What was that
projects.
again?
Safe Routes to School, the woman who does our district has emailed the planning board about this.
About what?
About, they have grant money available for sidewalks, or for improvements for safe roads, so.
It seems like you should be able to walk from Conant Park in the library to the elementary school. And you can right now, but it's like not a sidewalk.
So one of the ideas I've been having, and obviously this is gonna make my neighborhood much better, but this could be said anywhere else in town. Where we have neighborhoods that are going in, for example, on Pleasant Street, they're not too far off, you know, that are, you know, a couple hundred feet, no, a couple hundred feet, but several,
Yeah.
maybe 1,000 feet or whatever, they're separated. There should be a connection that should be reviewed to be put in between those neighborhoods that have sidewalks, because we take the in lieu of payment, we have that fund in there. We should make these neighborhoods connectable, so someone could take their kid on a little bike and ride on the sidewalk, actually not just make it 1,000-foot long
Yeah.
journey,
You
and
mean
then,
like Woodmar and
Yeah.
Nicholas Lane? and-
correct, exactly.
Because an argument you get about not making the sidewalks into a subdivision as woods, the sidewalks to nowhere.
And another one,
Sidewalks to the end of the main road, there's no sidewalk there, why do you put a sidewalk in? Well,
And put-
because at some point, probably there's gonna be a sidewalk put in
And
there.
that was Wayne Feiden's idea in Northampton with, people would say, like on King Street or wherever,
Mhm.
you know, and the reg said, you're gonna sidewalk. Why? You know, there's none on the side of the street except us. Well, there could be someday, so you're gonna put it in.
Do it, because if you don't pay for it, we gotta pay for it.
Yeah.
I mean, another great neighborhood, Sarah Lane to Caitlin. You have two small neighborhoods
Yeah.
that have sidewalks, but there's no connection to it.
Yeah.
Even for
Absolutely.
like 10-year-olds going to see their friend or
Yeah.
whatever, like.
It's
That's how we
like,
build
Yeah.
communities, like you said, right? That's the connection to your
there's
neighbors.
plenty of right-of-way. Someone's got, I mean, you know, for us to get anything done in this town is like pulling teeth. So,
Paul, I think you got some great ideas, and we should try to. You're like, no,
They
I
stop
got these
here.
ideas. Stop.
Once you get them talking,
Yeah,
once you get them talking.
he's a smart guy.
Oh, he's a wealth of knowledge, this man.
I know.
And Keith was, I was sad to see Keith go, because
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Alfred had a lot, and that's why we're expecting great things from Sarah, to pick up the slack.
Yeah, Sarah, I think when I first, no, at one point, were there like 4 engineers?
yeah, because Tiffany Labrie was here,
Tiffany,
Keith, myself.
John Furman.
Oh, Furman?
Yeah, well, I took Furman's spot, so.
Oh, he's still around town though.
Hey,
Tiffany, Lamar, or.
Labrie, yeah,
Labrie,
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
There's no way for us to be, I mean, because we probably don't meet any neighborhood thresholds for community block grants, right? Because we're too wealthy.
you
Even-
probably could get some like, for senior centers and stuff like that. You could probably do it if you're doing it through a CDC. But yeah, you know, most projects are income driven,
Right.
you know, income eligibility.
But like the apartments on Route 10 I'm talking about, so like, I know they do this, the Safe Routes to School, that's there now, but continuing a sidewalk further north on Route 10.
Yeah, I mean, it
To
would
the
have to be
apartments.
servicing 51% or more low-mod income.
Right.
And you would have to, I mean, literally, you know, I did that for 10
Are you
years.
talking down to Gun Road?
And
Yeah.
We literally went door to door asking people, you know, how much, what's your household income? Because we want to replace the water line.
Well, you have census data for
Oh,
that too
okay.
now, so. You have that, that's all
You do
online.
have some of that, but but literally, I mean, if you're going down a street, you gotta know that these are the direct beneficiaries from it.
Right.
Yes.
Census block stuff you can use for like parks and stuff, the draw from outside the area. But if it's, you're providing water or treating their sewage or going on their sidewalk, you are literally going down both sides of the street and asking for income verification.
I've been really impressed with what the ad hoc grant committee has done in town, and they actually have gotten grants for sidewalks. I wish I had the map of what sidewalks they're have gotten approval for, but they are working, getting grants approved for more sidewalks in town. So it may be an interesting conversation to have with them, if you had a specific.
So there's an ad hoc sidewalk committee?
An ad hoc sidewalk committee?
There is?
No, the ad hoc grant committee.
Oh, okay, all right.
So they work with groups in town to facilitate getting the grant application.
So if
filed.
when they get the grants, who is notified that they got the grant?
Well,
So usually it's Ed's the,
Town administrator?
Ed's the agent that's identified as the signatory.
I wonder where he goes with it after that.
Yeah, here's my sidewalk story. It's Route 20 in Weston. Is where the shops all are. And for years, they were waiving the sidewalk requirements for all those businesses that went in.
yeah.
Okay, good God, that's who you should be making build the sidewalk. They waived them and waived them. And their argument was, well, it's unsafe to have people walking there, so if you don't have sidewalks, people have to use their cars. Brilliant. Okay, the shops all go in, so what do you see? You see dirt paths on both sides of the road where pedestrians have to walk to go shopping at the stores. Right where the sidewalk should have gone.
Well, remember King Street in Northampton, there was a lot of hullabaloo one time about sidewalks there. Well, how many low-income apartment complexes off of Barrett Street and
Yeah.
Bridge Road and all the other ones that,
Oh, yeah.
the only means those people had to get to some of those shops were sidewalks, to go
Absolutely.
shopping down at King Street, so,
Yeah, and that's exactly what you're talking about.
yeah.
There are people that don't have cars. It's
Well,
all about.
I think we beat all these horses up tonight.
There's one other thing on the list of advice and
Yes.
tips, and it's the next one down. And it's the peer review. And I talked to you guys about this before, and I talked to Ed, and Ed I think is interested. But and this was, do you remember the conversation we had during your public hearing for the stormwater regulations? And there was an exchange that I had with the representative of the Conservation Commission. And after that exchange, I said, you're right, you guys should issue the wetlands permits, or you should do the stormwater management. And there were a couple of things he said. First of all, he mentioned that he didn't think that the Wetlands Act had anything to do with stormwater management, which I thought was interesting. But he also said that if we were talking peer reviews, and he was saying, oh, the Conservation Commission does have peer reviews, we have somebody that goes out and checks the work. But they don't have anybody who's doing a peer review of the application in the plan.
We do.
And his response was, no, well, we take their engineer's word for it, because they have a seal. Bad idea. I mean, all engineers are great, but there's usually always a fork in the road, and go this way or that way. We suggested in there, and I talked to you about a number of times, is the town should hire a firm to do all their peer engineering work for all of their projects. That would be the planning board, that would be the zoning board of appeals, that would be the conservation commission, it would be the same firm. And that firm, the deal is, we're gonna let you do all the peer reviews. Don't come in with applicants' projects. We don't want you.
Yes.
You are our guy, you're our firm to do these peer reviews. And that's what the quid pro quo is. And there are a couple of towns that are doing that.
Okay.
But it's almost like having your own town engineer.
Yeah.
It does a number of things. First of all, it keeps you from having to scramble to find an engineering firm to do a peer review on an application that comes in.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that. You just send it to whomever you've selected for that.
We had talked about it. We do it anyway here. We get independent reviews on subdivisions and the stormwater.
Yeah.
But we had talked before about signing up a contractor, but you're suggesting it should be done for a contractor that would handle those boards.
Yes, I mean, the editor, the selectman, whoever's, procurement should do that. And, they would do reviews for the Board of Health, any special permits that come in. And there's a real advantage to having a continuity with the same firm reviewing, doing the same, reviewing the same review for the projects. How nutty is it to have, and I've seen this happen, where somebody's coming in for a project, for the solar project, or coming in for the special permit with the planning board, either the wetlands firm for the conservation commission. Conservation and the planning board each hire their own peer review engineering firm, different firm. They didn't agree. They came back with recommendations and they were not on the same page. So now you have dueling boards
Oy.
and dueling engineers, and it was a real issue. But having, and there's just something good about just having that relationship.
So, can I ask you a question? The towns that are doing this, how are they funding it? Are they baking it into the cost of the?
You are allowed to charge a outside consultant fee.
Uh-huh. For,
And the applicant pays for that.
Ours,
It shouldn't cost you a nickel
that,
for anything. ZBA can do that, Conservation Commission can do that, Planning Board can do that, any special permits the selectmen, issue. They are authorized to hire outside consultants to do reviews. This is a particular statute that allows for that.
yep.
And
And they're
that's
just-
just another fee. You've got your filing fee, by the way, there's the peer review fee.
and
And what you do there is, and the problem with not having somebody set is you're supposed to go through some sort of, for every project, a competitive process to find your peer review engineering firm, which can take 2 months, depending on the sophistication of the project. If you've got your firm already, under contract, the day that application comes in, that application gets emailed to the firm, they get back to you with, okay, charge them, this is what the fee should be for that, the review fee should be for that.
see, because every time we've had to submit for peer review, I've had to go to the company and they have to send the quote back.
Yeah.
Then they have to send the contract, they have to have the contract signed not only by the board accepted, I sign it, then it has to be signed by the town accountant. So if you have a yearly contract, you bypass all of that because it's already taken care of.
And my,
Right now, it's on a case-by-case basis.
and my understanding is, and you guys can probably correct me, is I believe the town can contract for 1 year,
Yes.
and there are 2 one-year extensions they can sign up for. So
Well,
you basically.
You can do as long as you want, but you can do an on-call and set the terms as you
Yeah.
like.
But I know Palmer does that, and I know
What?
we've talked about it, just like we talked about using that
think
uniform
John Furman
application.
suggested
we
that.
don't use.
Yeah, that's easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a big deal, it's just,
I'll check with Ed on it, but also cumulatively to see if the conservation and zoning would be on board with that.
That makes sense. We don't run into that situation that you just described.
Yeah. But not to have an engineer reviewing application plans representing the
Yes.
town is not a good idea. I mean, you wouldn't do it. Somebody came in with a subdivision plan, you're gonna take face value, that plan, and just sign it?
well, no, last subdivision we had it peer reviewed, because I remember,
No, you haven't had all of them peer reviewed.
no, the last 3, they were peer reviewed.
I don't think, since I've been working with you, I don't believe you've had a subdivision that has not been peer reviewed.
We haven't had any that has not.
Right, exactly.
You guys are saying the same thing.
Yes, I guess.
You just did a double negative on me.
Likewise with your special permits. The auto, you had a peer review done on that for the stormwater. And you need to have that done, and then the beauty is it shouldn't cost the town a nickel. You are able to charge that as an outside
Yeah,
consulting.
that's passed along.
Yeah.
But we can set up the contract with a single organization beforehand, so you don't have to go through.
Or your board, you know, if you have to go out to
Yes.
peer review on conservation,
Right.
or ZBA has to, they have to go through the same process I do. Either you get quotes or you whatever, and then,
Yeah.
as you say, time lapses in between
Yeah,
here.
it delays the progress of a project.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it'll cost the applicant more money, but it'll streamline the process. You're gonna have faster process for the applicant.
Yeah,
It's a drop in the bucket.
It is. And somebody has to pay for it. And why should the taxpayer pay for it?
Well, our application fees too don't cover that kind of money either.
No. And yet, that's probably something you should have,
You know,
the next person.
If we had to take that out of the, like, the subdivision fees, we wouldn't have any money, because right now, we're self-funded. We're not getting any money from the town.
Yep.
All the revenue that we generate for our expenses, including consulting and whatever, is generated through fees. You know, a good chunk of that's gonna get dried up when these bylaws are completed. And I may have to go back to the town and say, listen, you're gonna have to pony up about $5,000 a year for a budget like they used to, because it was taken away from us about 6, 7 years ago. So we're self-sustaining right now.
All right, so
What else you got? You all
That's
set?
my last pitch. That's my last.
I'm sorry if I'd known,
I went through that. Oh, yeah, my last one is the, use that uniform application
the zoning application.
for everything.
Now, listen, I've been trying to, and it's in the hands of the building department, but I can't seem to have the building department use it. And I am not the authority over him.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen one used yet.
Well, there are two things. Now, one is the zoning permit, that goes to your building department, and he should be doing that. But the other is just your standard, instead of having a separate application for a special permit, a separate application for site plan approval, a separate application for
Yeah.
solar panels, and a separate application for, what else do you have? Accessory apartments.
Accessory apartments.
You know, and a separate application for the ZBA, and a separate application for the selectmen. You know, there should be one standard zoning application where they just check off who's it going to, what's it for, what the section is, just a standard of it.
And for your information, folks, to new people, this gentleman developed it for us. I have copies, and I got the approval from the town administrator that it would be appropriate. And I can't recall if it was presented to the select board, but it's been submitted, and it hasn't been used yet.
makes sense.
There you go. You know, it's just to make, your job is tough enough as it is. If you could just standardize stuff, it makes it so much easier.
I got one more question for you. So,
I'm sorry, I'm done.
Time's up.
one more. A new person
Yeah.
that's coming in. You know, I know you've worked a lot in terms of the formatting and the consistency of the document. I'd imagine you're probably gonna have some conversations with them at least, or with that person, so that they understand what that format is, so that it's not lost.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
We have lunch today.
Um,
And,
Had I known, you didn't surprise me, I had a cake tonight.
I have blood sugar too.
No, seriously. Before Larry goes, and we'll adjourn shortly here anyway, but I do want to thank him very much. He's been such a great resource for us and a help. We already know his resume and his experience, and it was invaluable coming here because I'm not a planner, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a lawyer. Some people understand the lingo as the years have gone by better than I do, the technical aspects of it. But we really need this type of an authority to be our consultant so that the process runs smoothly and the town is protected going forward and the regs are followed. So I want to thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, man.
You know, I do this like you, I consider you to be a friend. You can call me, ask me any question you want, as long as I don't have to, A, look it up, or write anything up. I'm happy to give you anything that's up here for free.
Just don't text him past 9.
And I want to wish you and Barb well and
Yeah,
good,
it's good.
good health and all, and enjoy your winters in Mexico.
Oh, if we ever get back.
I hope you
don't know if
do.
we go back last year. I don't know. I'm expecting another lockdown.
I hope.
I hope not.
And I'll be expecting from you then
I
the
don't
new
know.
person's contact information.
Yeah, I will get that, I will contact him and you and get you.
And that way there, the new person that we meet, and hopefully we'll like him and put him on board, we'll have him come to a meeting so we can all probe him
Does-
like we did this guy.
Does this person live in Shutesbury?
That's a very specific.
So, is that good or bad?
Just wondering.
Well, hypothetically, no.
We only hire people.
But I don't want
from
you to start listing every town.
No, that was the only one I know of.
Oh, boy.
I know how.
Well, I know
I have
what
a
you're
grand-
thinking about.
A
Is that
5-year-old
bad?
grandson who
Huh?
lives like
Do you think it's bad?
No. No.
Well, I have no other business. Anybody reports from anything, Dan, from your committees or anything that's,
Anything for this committee? We're actually, tomorrow, this is just interesting, I think. Tomorrow I'm meeting with a person from the park grant, for the Parks Committee, to try to get a accessible path from Conant Park, the parking lot in Conant Park to Route 10, built. So we put in I wrote a grant with the grants
we
committee.
can use our sidewalk money?
Well, it's not sidewalk, it's gotta be pervious surface,
Oh, okay.
because, so it'll be a hard crushed with stone, so. Because of, some of the areas it's crossing, but at least will allow people to come in from the street, down to where the pavilion is, hopefully, if it works out. So, nothing really doing with this committee, but, it's something I'm doing tomorrow for the town.
Thank you. Anything from your end, Sarah?
The housing production plan, we have a draft from PVPC. If anyone's interested, I can share that. And we have a community meeting scheduled for September 23rd. It's going to be Zoom. So there'll be information going out about that to present the housing production plan.
Okay, thank you. Other than that, any other business? I'll take a,
I did have.
oh, Joy, I'm sorry.
I did have homework last time I was here. Cindy just gave me homework. about-
Homework?
Yeah, about the Airbnb situation. So from what I reviewed, from my interpretation, and please go ahead and review yourself, based on the usages of, and what is allowed in residential homes, Airbnb would not be allowed. Right, hotels, motels not allowed in any residential area, but lodging houses are allowed in a residential village with a special permit. So I think that's something that we're gonna have to maybe review further down the road.
There-
Go back to the-
There was a Massachusetts Superior Court ruling
Yeah, that's why I looked into it.
that came in, that was what, in June or
Yeah,
May
yeah.
or something?
We discussed it at the last meeting.
Okay.
I don't think there was.
I wasn't there.
Yeah, so that's why I looked into to see what was going on in our town bylaws, and it doesn't seem like it's something that would be allowed based on the use and regulations. So I think that's something we're gonna have to review. And in regards to hybrid meetings, that was another thing Cindy was wondering about. We can do remote meetings until April 1st, 2022, and if we're doing any kind of strange hybrid version, we should call the Division of Open Government. I strongly recommend to run anything by them before we do anything hybrid.
Okay.
They won't have to worry about that from me.
Yeah.
No, seriously, with that setup over there, it'll take,
Is that new?
like Paul ran it for the Carvana hearing out in Southwick, but I mean, it takes a person to keep muting and bringing people in and out of it. You take somebody away from the meeting, you know?
The biggest issue with that Carvana hearing was that you had people that were listening through the Zoom, and they had two different microphone systems. One was underpowered, the other one was just right. But that microphone, or that PA system wasn't near the microphone for the Zoom. So people would be presenting and you could not hear it.
Oh,
And it was just a total waste of time.
That's a problem.
So with technology, and here's the other problem, particularly if you have a controversial project,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to control the Zoom and the general public at the same time. So you're gonna have outbursts, and
Can't you just loop everybody?
so
Yeah, so-
apparently not everybody knows how to do that, so, yeah.
Okay. I thought that was, you mute everybody, except for the board members, and then you open them up as they,
So whoever was, so you need people that understand the whole,
Eons ago, but that was.
Capabilities of Zoom.
Regulation, that's pretty interesting.
Cool, thanks.
that would be
There's a ton
a really good
added
idea.
that we didn't already have. but,
Oh,
uh,
interesting.
Did we adjourn?
Have a copy.
Thank you.
Not yet.
Oh.
Motion to adjourn?
Paul?
Yes.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.